So I got delayed on shooting the next spine bulk, which is this episode. We're doing a Goodwill book haul because I didn't have time to finish Necroscope on time because I've been dealing with a very sick cat. He has kidney issues. He's getting older. I'm very worried because it's my best friend and I love him and we hope he gets better. He's in the hospital. He'll be out tomorrow. But it's going to be a rough next couple of weeks, but I'm going to try and get some videos out. And instead of doing the Necroscope video, which is going to be fairly involved, I'm doing this video instead, which is a very simple video, which is a book haul from Goodwill. Why Goodwill? I don't have any particular love for the company. They are, they're known for paying disabled workers below minimum wage. They're known for their executives taking pretty large salaries. They're known for many not so good things, but unfortunately, it's the only bookstore in town. It's not a bookstore, but they carry books. We had a bookstore, a pretty good used bookstore called The Open Book in Santa Clarita, but it mysteriously closed a few months ago and is reopening in Pasadena, which is nowhere near where I live. I mean, I can go there, but I can go to a different bookstore in Pasadena too. So good luck, but we miss you in Santa Clarita, and we need a bookstore. I'm not going to open one. I don't know anything about business, but if you know anything about business, you should open the bookstore. So we're doing Goodwill, even though, like I said, I have no particular love for the Goodwill Corporation, Goodwill Industries International. But occasionally you find some really strange things there, and that's what I was hoping to find on this last book haul, and I'll say I came back with some pretty good stuff. We've got some good books today. It's not a good idea to introduce the video by saying it's going to suck, because it's not. It's going to be good. I just don't want people to think I'm doing some kind of work for the Goodwill company, because I'm not. I'm not getting anything from anyone. I'm broke. That's why I went there. I don't have any money. If I had more gas money, I'd go over to Ojai. I'd go to Bart's Books. That's a bookstore. You go to Bart's Books. Oh boy. I mean, if you've got the money to spend at Bart's Books, you will spend it because it's a fantastic bookstore. And the Open Book was pretty good. Nowhere near as good as Bart's, but I enjoyed going there and finding, they had pretty good selection occasionally. The overpriced paperbacks, like everywhere. You used to be able to get a mass market paperback for $2. At Goodwill, you get them for 50 cents back in the day. Paperbacks were 50 cents. Hardbacks were $1. That day is long gone, as I'll discuss in a minute. But it was a pretty good bookstore. I do miss it. So instead of going to the Open Book, I'm going to all of the 3 Goodwill locations in Santa Clarita. One in Canyon Country, and then I don't know what the other ones are in. I think one's in Newhall, maybe. One's in Valencia. It's all Santa Clarita. I don't really care. But I went to the 3 Goodwills in Santa Clarita and one Goodwill in Fillmore, California, which is a very small town west of the smaller town where I live on 126. And you'll be surprised to know that the Fillmore location, the small town location, actually had a better selection of books and was significantly cheaper. And I'll talk about prices as I go through the book haul. And it used to be, like I said, books at Goodwill were always $1 if they were hardcover and 50 cents if they were paperback. But nowadays, it's different. And some of them are like $5 or $6, which to me is ridiculous for Goodwill. But anyway, back in the 90s is when I started going. A girlfriend told me about it because I only went to used bookstores. I never even considered checking out like Goodwills for books because it just seemed like you just find self-help books and old Bibles and Bible study programs and never anything that is particularly interesting. But I was surprised that I would find interesting things there. There's always 4 or 5 books that you would not expect to find in a Goodwill, because you think you know the community in which you live, but in fact, you don't. You only know parts of it, and then Goodwill represents some stranger elements as well. And I remember the best thing I ever found at Goodwill, the most interesting thing I ever found at Goodwill was in like 1999 in Normal, Illinois. I found a copy in paperback of the Communist Manifesto, very slim, but inside, 50 cents, inside, treasure map. Now you probably can't see that very well in that camera, so I'll scan it. But that's a treasure map, all right. And I've never gone there, but I have always admired this particular edition, which is not. It's not even this isn't a leftist press. This is a mainstream press. The editor, Samuel H. Beer. You may know the name. He was an economist, a Harvard guy. Or was he an economist or yeah? He was a political scientist. He specialized in British politics. Samuel Beer, the editor here, and was a longtime professor at Harvard. He was the president of Americans for Democratic Action, the ADA, in the early 1960s. The ADA was a progressive anti-communist group, and their first order of business was to try to convince Dwight D. Eisenhower to run for president as a Democrat in 1948. Now, that didn't work. Of course, Eisenhower had better luck as a Republican. And it kind of throws their whole progressive veneer into question. And so there were a lot of CIA involved in the formation of the ADA, and I'm not saying it was a cutout, although I am saying that it was very close. It was definitely an aspect of the cultural Cold War. And so Samuel Beer edits this volume of the Communist Manifesto from that perspective, and the introduction makes it clear that he's not a communist, not a fellow traveler. He is, in fact, a liberal, a progressive liberal. Many members of the ADA went on to play important roles in the Kennedy administration, which we'll get to actually in today's book haul.
No pain, baby, no gain. No pain, no gain.
But that's the sort of thing you can find at Goodwill if you're paying attention. 50 cents. Nowadays, they probably wouldn't even put it out. Even though it's, comes from Croft's Classics. I need to go over to that. I need to find that location, see if there's any treasure there. But anyway, this is what I got at Goodwill just the other day. Now we're going to start with the mass market paperbacks, and there's only 3, which says something about the changing nature of Goodwill and the changing nature of literary publishing, is that mass market paperbacks have almost disappeared. You don't see them anymore. They're gone. You can find old ones at other bookstores, but new ones, do they even make them? I'm sure they do. I haven't been to an airport kiosk recently. But they used, do they have books in airports? Surely. I don't know. But I do know that I got 3 fairly, well, I'm not going to say they're in. We're going to start with some of the least interesting books. I know this first book is what I call a Goodwill classic. And you'll find it at almost any Goodwill you go to. And I've never purchased it because I've never been interested in it. And I decided to purchase it now for educational purposes, to show you that if you see this book, you're definitely in a Goodwill. And that is The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper. Now, if you know James Fenimore Cooper, you may know he was a very popular writer in the 19th century, and that Edgar Allan Poe not Edgar Allan Poe, good Lord. Mark Twain, how do I confuse Edgar Allan Poe and Mark Twain? Mark Twain hated him. See, I've been thinking a lot about Edgar Allan Poe because of, you'll see later. But anyway, I got The Last of the Mohicans. I don't know when I'm going to read it or if I'm going to read it or if I want to read it. Maybe it's a great book. If you think this is a great book, let me know. Because otherwise it's just hanging out. And it's good, I think, for any library to have a little bit of fat in it. And the fat, you can skim off the fat when you want to. I like to give books away. I don't like to resell them very often. You never get any money for them. So you may as well just give them to somebody. See here, you want Last of the Mohicans? I never read it. But I've got it for temporarily. And it was like, this was a cheap one. I wouldn't have got this if it was over $1. This was 99 cents. See, the thing is at the Fillmore Goodwill, you can still get books for 99 cents. That's what's so great about it. You go to Santa Clarita, none of the books are 99 cents. They're all at least $2, $3, $4, $5, I think up to $6. Whereas if you go to Fillmore, go to the smaller town Goodwills, they're cheaper. And in my experience lately, they've had a better selection. Which isn't, I'm not considering this particularly great. Like I said, this is a Goodwill book. You'll find this in pretty much any Goodwill. This or one of the volumes of Dante's Divine Comedy, usually Purgatorio. Usually that's the one you get. That's what gets stuck at Goodwill. And Last of the Mohicans. For a while, I was finding a lot of Chaucer at Goodwill, but those days are long gone. And then here, this book. Now, see, this is another book that I never would buy if it weren't really cheap at Goodwill. And that's this Signet Classics autobiography of Andrew Carnegie, a rich guy. Not my favorite people, rich guys. I don't really like them. I don't like to read about them. But it's important to know about rich guys. These are important books to have in your collection because sometimes you'll read another book and it'll refer to this book and you'll be like, God, I wish I had the autobiography of Andrew Carnegie so I can look at it. And now I do. And also the Gospel of Wealth. Now that's one they left out of the Bible. It's one of those Gnostic Gospels. So this is not a good book, but it's an important thing to buy cheaply if you're going to have it. And now, the best of the three mass market paperbacks. I'm trying to avoid mushing my words. I'm trying to adapt a kind of casual style, but at the same time, not so casual that my Midwestern tendencies toward laziness in speech come to the fore. I'm trying to be somewhere in the middle between my natural cadence and some kind of a pedagogical tone. So this isn't a classroom, nor is it a bedroom. Although it is a bedroom, but it's a bedroom. It's no longer a bedroom. It's a studio. But anyway, this is the other book that I got. That's a mass market paperback, and I'm excited to say, Graham Greene. You gotta love Graham Greene, The Third Man, which I don't have. This was a movie first. And then the book came out, and it's not only The Third Man, two novellas, The Third Man and The Fallen Idol, both classic films directed by Carol Reed. So now 2 in 1 volume. I have The 10th Man, which was an unfilmed sequel to The Third Man that Graham Greene wrote. Now I have, and I'm surprised I've never read The Third Man, but now here it is. And this was like less than $1. And it should be. This should be like 10 cents, All this is a thin, but anyway. So those are, you see what I'm saying? You see the variety here. So you get a lot of like self-help books, a lot of economics books, how to make millions in a couple of days, how not to fuck up your taxes. You get those books, and then you get all the Jesus books, and then you get all the Stephen King books, and there were actually a few of them. So maybe you don't get those anymore. I don't know. But anyway, continuing on, the book haul. And this was a book. I think I got this in Canyon Country, and this is good to have because it's Penguin. I like the Penguin classics, and Ulysses S. Grant, his personal memoirs, written long after the Civil War. But this is mostly about his time as a general in the Civil War, and so it's basically a Civil War memoir. And this has a price tag on it for $7, but I did not pay $7. I think I paid $4. So this is not the sort of thing I would go searching for in a bookstore, but it's good. Like I said, these are interesting books. So I look forward to reading some Ulysses S. Grant. And then here's another one. Now they're not all going to be like this, but you're probably starting to notice a pattern. This is another. Here's Tom Mangold, Cold Warrior, which is a book about James Jesus Angleton, the CIA's master spy hunter. If you know about James Jesus Angleton, according to Paul Giamatti, he was really proud of his ancestry. So it was he pronounced the Jesus. So if you're into CIA, cultural Cold War, stuff, which I am, and I'll buy anything about these guys, him and Norman Holmes Pearson, because they intersect with the arts world and poetry in particular. But Angleton went. He's particularly interesting. So I've got a couple books on Angleton, and it's good to have more. And maybe we'll talk about a few sometime. We'll go over the old CIA collection. And then here's one that I never think about, and I've never, but it's a good book, I guess. It's a good book. Lady Sings the Blues. This is, I had forgotten about this book. This is a book a lot of people, I think, read in high school, and it just sort of passed me by, but here you go. It's Billie Holiday. And I was flipping through it, and you see, it's you got Orson Welles in here. I mean, but it also, back when you bought it, it came with a CD, and they didn't donate the CD. They kept the CD, and they donated the book, which is the 50th anniversary edition, Lady Sings the Blues. So I'm going to have this now, which, again, this was pretty cheap. Yeah. So, again, Goodwill. Now, this, again, is a book that I've actually never read in total. I've read excerpts from, but I've never read the entire book. And it's a very classic book in film schools that a lot of people are sick of, but I think still has some stuff to say. And it's Walter Murch, In the Blink of an Eye. And this is the second edition. So Walter Murch is a famous film editor, and this is his classic text on the art of film editing. And it gets assigned very often in film schools. In fact, I know one person who's teaching it now. And I don't know if this comes from a CalArt student or not, but I did find it in Santa Clarita. And I'll get to read the whole thing instead of just little, and it's not even long, it's short. So you can read it pretty quickly, I think. And then, well, this was interesting because back before the internet was everywhere. I mean, the internet was always everywhere, but it wasn't always everywhere. Back before the internet was everywhere, and back before the internet was really what it is now, before YouTube, if you wanted a lecture on something, you'd have to go look for a book or for some audio books. And one place you could go was the Learning Company, and they give you these cassettes that would be courses, great courses taught by professors. And here's one on Machiavelli in context. Machiavelli, including the Prince. There's a lot of talk of the Prince, of course, because that's mostly what people talk about when they talk about Machiavelli. And the whole thing is here, parts 1 and 2. And so I found this was less than $10. And these are fun. I enjoy these. I like cassettes, and I have a cassette player. I sit on the front porch and I'll learn to be Machiavellian. Maybe I'll finally get somewhere in life. Now that I've got this, whoever donated this had that same thought, I'm sure. But now I can finally get what's coming to me. But they didn't just have Machiavellian context. They also had The Prince, so I got The Prince. So now I'm all Machiavelli'd up. Like I said, I'm unstoppable. You're never gonna hear from me again. That's that. So that's a lot of Machiavelli, but it's Italian literature. And then this was I was surprised to find at the Goodwill in Fillmore for $1.99, and that's Lincoln and the Bardo. Now, some of you may be familiar with this book. Many of you have probably read it. It's a very famous book. But I am one of those people who's never gotten into George Saunders. Now, I've only really read a few short stories, but they've always kind of never really worked for me. So I don't really know George Saunders, but I do know Abraham Lincoln, and I do know the Bardo. I read any book that takes place in the Bardo state. Ever since I read Brian Geison's The Last Museum in high school, right before seeing David Lynch's Lost Highway, I've been obsessed with the Bardo state. So Lincoln and the Bardo, and Lincoln as an Illinoisan, as a native Illinoisan, I'm contractually obligated to read any book with Abraham Lincoln in it or see any movie with him in it as a character. So it's important that I found this book, and I'm glad I did. So now I can continue to renew my my birth certificate. And maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll find that I actually love George Saunders. Maybe he's the greatest writer of the 21st century. I don't know. Speaking of well-liked books, here's another one that everyone else has read, and I never read it. And I've heard mixed things. Some people really love this book. Some people think it's crap. I haven't read it, but I have met the author. It's Jennifer Egan's A Visit from the Goon Squad. Again, found this in Fillmore. Small town Fillmore for $1.99. And this is a pretty good shape for a new book. And look, it looks like a PowerPoint presentation. I didn't know that. But I remember I went to AWP one year, and I was working in the registration booth so I could get free admission. And when you work at the registration booth, you have to check everyone's ID, including all the famous people. And one of them was Jennifer Egan, and she left her ID at the booth, so we had to call her up over the intercom. Jennifer Egan, you've left your ID at the check-in booth. Please come and retrieve it. Meanwhile, we're trying to think of all the things we could do with Jennifer Egan's ID. We didn't do anything with it because she came and got it fairly quickly. But now I have this book, so I'll learn a thing or two. Winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Now that's a pretty famous one. People, all kinds of people have won that for years, and now it's here. Well, yeah, here's some China Miéville. I've only read bits of China Miéville, but this is a famous one. The City and the City. See, Goodwill is a good place to get popular books from authors you may be interested in. And, China Miéville sort of, I know him primarily as a science fiction writer, but he's also a very political writer. And this is a Del Rey trade paperback, so it looks to be science fiction. And it's probably more than that, because he's he's a very literary sort of science fiction writer, postmodern, China Miéville. If Philip K. Dick and Raymond Chandler's loved child were raised by Franz Kafka, the writing that emerged might resemble The City and the City. So that's what we've got. So I look forward to that. Looks like it's got something on here. Random House Reader's Circle. That's tiny. I thought it was a birthmark. Oh, yeah. Every once in a while, you get a physics book or something about science. And here's one about, I like voids. I like all forms of void. I never get bored. And this is from Yale University Press and Templeton Press. And it's a book about voids. The Strange Physics of Nothing by James Owen Weatherall. Now, I have no idea about the reputation of James Owen Weatherall, but I'm going to read this book and learn. I'm going to learn it. Finally, I'll get my hands on a book. I got my hands on a book about nothing. And so, I mean, actually, I already have a few books about nothing, but it's always good to have more nothing in your library. And again, that was like $2. Now, here's one. Now we're still getting into cryptography. Joseph Garlinsky, The Enigma War. Again, a book by someone I've never heard of. And this is the inside story of the German Enigma codes and how the Allies broke them. I don't really have that many books about World War II. I mean, I have a few, but I like codes. And again, it's a very cheap book. And this is one of those books. Sometimes you'll be like, code book, and I'll read this. Maybe I'll keep it. Maybe I'll give it away. It's got a foreword by Professor R.V. Jones. That could be good. And, maybe it's we'll see. We'll see. Nonfiction. Now, this is a similar book. It's Double-Edged Secrets, U.S. Naval Intelligence Operations in the Pacific During World War II. Now, suddenly, I have two World War II books about very sort of niche subjects. But that's fine, because now I'll know. I like anything to do with espionage. I'll read anything to do with anything with intelligence operations. Because to me, it goes part and parcel with other things that I'm interested in. So that's this book. Again, almost nothing about it except that it was there and it was cheap, and it's a nice hardcover. You can knock on them. And there's pictures and stuff. Now here's another book I used to see all over the place, and it's Mr. Wilson's Cabinet of Wonder, Pronged Ants, Horned Humans, Mice on Toast, and Other Marvels of Jurassic Technology. Now, this is a book about the Museum of Jurassic Technology, which is in Los Angeles. It's a very popular spot that I've heard good things about, but I've never been there. But I live close enough to Los Angeles, I can go over and see what's going on. And in the meantime, I'll have this book, which is pretty short, and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for nonfiction. So they've got that. Lawrence Weschler. Pretty good. All these books have awards on them. Not all of them, but enough of them. That's what happens when you go to Goodwill. Because these books, they sell a lot of copies, and then people get rid of them. Oh, here we go. Here's a Library of America book. Talk about the Kennedy administration. John Kenneth Galbraith, Library of America. Now, there's your Cold War liberalism. You've got this has American Capitalism, the Great Crash, 1929, The Affluent Society, which was a very famous book, and The New Industrial State. So Galbraith was an economist and an advisor to JFK. He's the first economist to be published in the Library of America. So I like good Library of America edition, and what if I one day want to read The Affluent Society? I've got it right here. I can read, any one of these books. So, and because these are usually, they're not that expensive, but it's unusual to find a Library of America book at Goodwill in 2010, I think, anyway. And we have, here's a book on Black Hawk. So I collect books on Illinois, the Illinois region. So you've got this book on the Black Hawk War and the figure of Black Hawk, and it was written by a white guy, but it seems to be fairly sympathetic to Black Hawk. Henry Holt is the publisher. And it was I don't know how much it was. A stirring retelling of the Black Hawk War that puts into dramatic focus the forces struggling for control over the American frontier. So yeah, we've got a book on Black Hawk. I always do with another Black Hawk book. And this one, again, I like the Thames and Hudson World of Art, Ballet and Modern Dance. This is not This is not a book I would ordinarily just seek out. That's why it's good to go to Goodwill. You just run into stuff. So now I've got it's well illustrated because these books are very well illustrated, very glossy paper. There's a number of them. I have a few. I don't really collect them, but I'll pick one up if it seems interesting. So we've got Isadora Duncan, Martha Graham, all kinds of good stuff, and ballet and modern dance. Susan Au is the author, or Au, A-U. This is a book. I'm pretty sure this book is for young adults, but it seemed interesting enough. It's The Fools of 49. So California Gold Rush, 1848, 1856. A new approach to America's past using original sources, letters, diaries, documents, maps, songs, speeches, and illustrations of the period to tell the history of the United States and the words of the people who shaped it. So yeah, that seems interesting. And again, there was a series, the Living History Library is what this is part of, and meant for younger readers, but still of interest. It's got pretty interesting illustrations. So yeah, a couple bucks. Oh, and then of course, John Fowles, The French Lieutenant's Woman. You'll find this. I see this at Goodwill a lot, actually. And I've read some John Fowles. I've read The Collector. I think it was his first book. There's also a movie by William Wyler. It sort of set off a trend of movies of men kidnapping women. But this isn't that. This is The French Lieutenant's Woman. And this is a pretty famous book in its day. I don't know if many people still read it, but I'll check it out. This is a scan. This is an old scan of an old copy. They just reprinted with a new cover. Joyce Carol Oates on the back. Dazzling, audacious, highly rewarding. So it's an early tweet of hers. Yeah. So we've got John Fowles, The French Lieutenant's Woman. Now, oh yeah. So I always I have this book, of course, and a few editions. But this one, I like these vintage copies because back when I first started reading Faulkner, this is William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying. Back when I started reading Faulkner, these were sort of the default editions you'd find at all the bookstores. So I have a lot of them in this particular series of vintage covers. So I try to get them all, and I don't have this in this particular edition. It's also corrected text. So yeah, I got William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying, good book. Classic of American modernism. Frequently imitated. Now this is a strange book that I found. It's called I've Killed Men. And it's an epic of early Arizona by Jack Ganshorn. Jack Ganshorn, who was a silent film cowboy and a soldier who, in this book, writes about his adventures as the fastest man on the draw in frontier Arizona, where he did kill people. Then, after leaving Arizona, he wound up serving with the U.S. Cavalry, and then spent his early boyhood in Tombstone, where Wyatt Earp and his four brothers were making history. So he supposedly tells the true story of the Earps and the OK Corral Massacre. And he goes to Wisconsin, runs away, and then on his way back to his father in Arizona, he kills his first man, a huge hobo who attacked him. Good Lord, back in Tucson, his life soon became a wildly exciting succession of gun battles. With cowboys, gamblers, and police, he soon became an expert at faro, monte, and poker, and was hired by gambling houses to run their games. During the Philippine insurrection, he fought with distinction as a scout at General Funston's side through... Oh, that's so. Yeah, he went to the Philippines. Did some terrible things in the Philippines, and then he came to Hollywood and got a job as a movie star. So this is his life story. He seems like kind of a bastard, But it's good to, I like to read these stories because, the book is called I've Killed Men. So, you can't get much more simple than that. Oh, and here you go. Here's a book I never thought I don't. Will I read this book? I don't know, but I have it. Herman Walk, The Caine Mutiny, which is the basis for a famous play, The Caine Mutiny Court Martial, which has been made into a film first by, maybe not first, but I know it was made into a film by Robert Altman. One of the few Robert Altman films I've never seen, and I've seen some pretty obscure Altman films, but I never saw The Caine Mutiny Court Martial. And then I think William Friedkin, it was his last film, was an adaptation of The Caine Mutiny Court Martial. And so I've got this book on The Caine Mutiny by Herman Walk, who was, I believe, a Nobel Prize winner. I've never read. No, he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. That's different. Who cares about that? 1952. A novel of World War II that seized the imagination of a country recovering from the ravagements of a devastating war in a manner unlike any other of American fiction before or since. So we've got a New York Times bestseller for more than 2.5 years. That's nothing. Sold millions upon millions of copies in the 40 years since it was first published. Here again, for a new generation of readers, is Walk's timeless... Is that how you say it? I didn't even look it up. Is Walk's timeless masterpiece, the legendary tale of Captain Queeg and the unforgettable mutiny aboard the USS Caine. It's big. It's like 500 pages, But it's masterly and brilliant. So I'll learn about this and then I'll watch those movies and I'll know even more. Based on a true story. And now this is great. This is one of the great ones. And I didn't even realize, I don't even have this book. But it's Samuel Beckett, Know How On. It's got 3 very, very short novels from his later prose work. It's Company, Ill Seen, Ill Said, and Worstward Ho. So I've read Worstward Ho, but I haven't read the other 2. And I'm surprised I didn't have this because I thought I had most of the Beckett, but I don't actually have this. It's kind of a huge oversight. But now I do, and I got it for $1, $2. This was at the one in Fillmore, the small town Goodwill. And I don't know if it's because they don't move as many books, like the good stuff sits longer, or if it's just like there's a really cool literary woman in Fillmore. I don't know. But somebody's reading Beckett and all that other stuff. Jennifer Egan and Lincoln in the Bardo. Oh, and this I'm giving away because I have this, but this is a great book. Julio Cortázar, Blow Up and Other Stories. Now, it wasn't originally called Blow Up and Other Stories, but because of the movie, which is a fantastic movie by Michelangelo Antonioni from 67, shot in Swingen, London. And it's a very short story. And the short story, it's not... the movie is very loosely based on the short story. It's a classic... it's a great screenplay. But anyway, these stories are great. And it's got Axolotl, House Taken Over, Idol of the Cyclades, Letter to a Young Lady in Paris. That's a great story. Continuity of Parks, fantastic. The Night Face Up. Yeah. Secret Weapons, The Pursuer, End of the Game. I think that was the original title, was End of the Game and Other Stories. Yeah, Secret Weapon. That's a good story. These are all good stories. Is that one? What's the one I think? Letter to a Young Lady in Paris is about a guy who's house or flat sitting for his friend who's away, and he keeps vomiting up rabbits. And he's writing this young woman a letter apologizing for all the chaos the rabbits have wrecked in her apartment because he just can't stop just vomiting them up. And now he has to care for them while he's just trying to house sit. And that's a good story. And these stories are very good. So I'm giving this away to a friend who deserves it because it's a good book. Cortázar. Julio Cortázar, great Argentine French writer. Spent a lot of time in France. And here we have Walter Lord, The Night Lives On, which is a sequel to his other A Night to Remember, which is a book about the Titanic, and this is the sequel to the book about the Titanic. New thoughts, theories, and revelations about the Titanic. Now, a lot of people love the Titanic because they love that movie by James Cameron. I've never seen it. I have a strange aversion to the cinematic works of James Cameron. Ever since I tried to watch Aliens as a kid and it didn't work, I never got into James Cameron. So I've never seen the movie Titanic, but as a child, I remember seeing on television the ruins of the Titanic when they found them. They used a submersible called Alvin, which, and of course, was one of the Chipmunks, Alvin and the Chipmunks, and it was like 1985, and they broadcast it on television. I got to watch this broadcast of this robot looking inside this wrecked ship in the ocean floor, and it was one of the most mysterious things I'd ever seen. I'd never seen anything like it. And it was around that time there was this great flood in my near, and I would think about how we would get flooded and all the houses would look like the Titanic, the ruins of the Titanic. They'd have algae growing on them or some underwater, creatures, flying through. And you'd think of what it would be like if this whole room suddenly started to fill with water and you were suddenly turned into a fish, and you had to swim through instead of walking through a room, you had to swim through it. And that was, to me, sort of a beautiful thought. So I've become interested in the Titanic, and also the discovery of the Titanic was tied to a Navy expedition to recover some crashed ships with, I believe, nuclear, something to do with the nuclear program aboard. So the discovery of the Titanic is tied to a larger Cold War operation. And these books, which I've never read, because again, I have only recently gotten into the Titanic. I've been exploring those memories from the 80s that I have. I'm interested in learning more. And I also recently read this short story by a guy named Anthony Owen Colby, an unknown, very good unknown writer. It was a short story called The Titanic, which is about the ghosts on the ship not wanting to be discovered, wanting to be left alone in their sort of icy bed. And it's a beautiful short story. He also wrote a novel called Healing Time, which I think I'll read soon because I found it recently. But this is The Night Lives On by Walter Lord. And I like this nice sinking ship cover. It's good to see it. I don't know. Titanic is... We'll talk more about the Titanic later. It's a kind of a strange symbol for me. And I got Stephen King, The Dark Tower. I found this edition with the Michael Whalen illustrations. And I read a lot of Stephen King when I was in 6th grade because I decided that... I will talk about this in another video in a little more depth, but I decided I wanted to read adult literature. And for me, growing up in a small town, the only thing I knew all the adults read was Stephen King, so I decided to start reading Stephen King. And I read this book, and I didn't like it. I didn't really like the fantasy stuff. I think I'll like it more now, because the Dark Tower as an image is compelling enough. It has enough of a history that I can sort of do things with it that I couldn't do in my head as a teenager. And it does have these illustrations. I do want to read these because I see them referenced a lot. And, I do have a certain fondness for Stephen King's 80s writing, 70s and 80s writing, and early 90s writing. But again, I haven't really reread much of it. I read all of it in 6th grade, and I have barely reread it since. So, I mean, it's Stephen King. What are you going to do? But they're easy to find. And they had the second book in this series, the Drawing of the Three, in the same edition in a different Goodwill bookstore. Goodwill store. So I think I'm gonna go back for that one, which I did not purchase at the time, but now I kind of want both of them. This is another book I did not expect to find. Comtoiben, Nora Webster. I've never read Comtoiben, if that's how you pronounce it. I didn't look that up either. But I do see. Actually, I've heard him say his name himself, so that's pretty close, I think, because I keep seeing him at 2220 in Los Angeles as an arts uh, place where I volunteer, and he shows up at a lot of readings and other events. I saw him with Gary Indiana right before Gary Indiana died at a reading, I think, for Rachel Kushner with who was in attendance. Why can't I think of Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth was there too, and Colm Toibin and Gary Indiana. And anyway, I've never read any of his novels, so I've got this one. I know he's dating the guy who runs Semiotext, or maybe they're married. I don't. I think they're just in a relationship. But he doesn't seem like that kind of a writer, and I think his primary influence is Henry James. So this to me is really interesting. I'll read this because yeah, he's an interesting guy, and I like him every time I see him. He's always pleasant. So. Oh, and I got another Stephen King. I got The Dark Half, because I always like this book because it sort of meta. It's got his meta fictional angle, where he uses his authorial alter ego Richard Bachman. It was a pseudonym that he created to write a few books that was then uncovered and exposed. And this is sort of like he treats that pseudonym as a kind of a character in a fictional setting, using another author who's like Stephen King, who's got another pseudonymous alter ego who's it turns out to be a bit nasty. And this was made into a pretty good movie by George Romero. Introduced me to the idea of the psychopomp as a teenager, and that's always fun to know about psychopomps. And yeah, I've always enjoyed this book. It's got kind of a nasty. The Richard Bachman books were kind of nastier, and here he's really playing with that. I think Richard Stark is the guy's name. The writer's George Stark. Yeah, Richard's based on Richard Stark, because Richard Stark got Richard Bachman. The name comes from Richard Stark in Bachman Turner Overdrive. So the alter ego here is named George Stark. And Thad Beaumont is the Stephen King character. But then George Stark turns out to be a serial killer, and it's the usual sort of fun with bodies. Here's a book I used to see all the time in the '90s, and I haven't thought of it at all since. But since I saw it at the Goodwill, I figured I'll get it, and that's Generation X by Douglas Copeland, who I have not heard anyone talk about for many, many years. So I don't know if this book is good or not, but it's kind of a generational classic, at least in its marketing. It is. So I look forward to checking it out. It's got an unusual trim size, with all this stuff in the margins, kind of like an atlas book, but much more American. So yeah, Douglas Copeland, Generation X. And these are also books for young adults, and there's a bunch of them, but they're really interesting. Cathedral: The Story of Its Construction by David Macaulay. So these books are very beautifully illustrated, and they show you basically how things are constructed. So this walks you through the construction of a fictional cathedral, and again, these have won awards. Incredibly well illustrated, really, and nice diagrams where you get you come to an understanding of how these things are constructed, and really fine detail. He's nice, So I've got Cathedral. These are all from the same writer and artist. Castle, Pyramid, which looks fantastic. City, and Mill. And I'm missing a few of them, or they didn't have. There's one that's Mosque and Underground, I've heard, the two that I want that I don't have. So those are cool, and this is a good, a good set. Again, and these were only like $3 each. So, and then of course they've always got cookbooks. So I got a vegetarian soup cookbook. I've been eating a lot of soup because of I'm on the, I've been dieting, I've been exercising, trying to get back into shape. So, I'll get some good soup ideas. And then this is the best find of the entire trip, something completely unexpected. And it's Across the Line, The Poetry of Baja California, edited by Harry Polkenhorn and Mark Weiss. And Mark Weiss is someone who I've worked with. He was a translator on a book that I laid out for Charles Alexander called Auto Cinema, a fantastic book of poems of prose poems on the cinema by a Mexican writer, Gaspar Orozco. And Mark Weiss passed away recently, but this is his press, Junction Press, and this is really a good find. I've never seen anything like this out in the wild, and to find it at Goodwill, pretty nice. And this is a beautiful, very, very, like, there's a lot of poets in here. Like, look at that contents, And so, this was fantastic. And it's bilingual, so you have Spanish on the left, English on the right. This is really cool. So, Poetry of Baja California. R.I.P. Mark Weiss. $25. I got it for $3. So that's what's good about Goodwill. If you want to go there looking for books, find them cheap. Now, that's the end of this episode. Next time we're going to do either Necroscope or another surprise, but I will get to Necroscope before the end of the month. I don't think we're going to get to Edie Poppy until December, but that'll be probably the first video in September. So we're going to do surprise video, Necroscope, Edie Poppy, and then, I don't know. I've got another couple of videos lined up to shoot that aren't tied necessarily to a particular book or author, but are related to the overall Spinebolt project, which we're still coming to an understanding of as we record. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep reading.